You're listening to the podcast with Diana and Natalina. Welcome to the pod.
Welcome back to episode 2 of the podcast. This is Diana, and I'm here with Natalina, and we are bringing you our second effort at this new show. We certainly would like to start the show with giving a word of thanks to all of the feedback that we received over the last, it's only been about a week and a half. Feedback is really important for these kind of shows, especially if you've ever done anything like this. You're not talking to anyone and you don't have like the energy in the room. So we really thrive on hearing what people have to say, good, bad, or otherwise. Of course, we like the good, but we are. So I guess you like what we're doing, and we're going to continue down kind of the little path that we have forged for ourselves and listen until we get better ideas from you. So, hi, Nat. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm excited to do this with you again. This show is so much fun because it's actually something that you and I have been doing for a regular basis for the better part of a year, over a year probably. And it's fun to open it up in such a way that we can get others involved and getting their opinions on the things that we talk about. And like you said, just kind of having sort of that feedback that almost, it keeps us in check. It keeps us on our toes, and it's really, really fun. I really enjoy this format. So definitely everyone, as you're listening, take notes, make sure that you leave us some good feedback that we can take forward into the next episode. But for now, I think that we're just enjoying having these conversations and hearing what you all have to say about it.
Yeah, well, one thing we started with on our first episode, and both Nat and I really enjoyed it, so was kind of surprising each other with a couple of articles just to force some spontaneous conversation, just for something different, because we do have things we want to talk about later that we maybe have more planned out, but we kind of want to have some different aspects to the show. So we are going to do that again, and this time, Nat, you get to start with your first article of the day.
Ooh, okay. Well, my first article I found absolutely fascinating based on the amount of time that I spend in social media, particularly Facebook. I spend an inordinate amount of time there. I give myself the justification that I do it because I do so much networking for, my job, what it is that I do. But also I spend a lot of time just screwing around on Facebook. I admit it. Too much. But anyway, so this guy, his name is Matt Honan, and he wrote this article on Wired magazine, and the title of the article is, "I liked everything I saw on Facebook for 2 days. Here's what it did to me." And it is the most interesting article. Matt made this plan that he was going to see exactly what would happen on Facebook if literally everything on his feed got a like from him. Pictures from his friends, articles that they shared, status updates, advertisements, whatever came through his feed he liked. And it started out where it was kind of fun. He enjoyed liking things from people that maybe he hadn't interacted with in a very long time, liking things that he would normally find kind of boring, like pictures of people's food and their kids, But he found that also the hard thing was that he was liking things he didn't really like. He would like things even if he hated it. He says, I decided to embark on a campaign of conscious liking to see how it would affect what Facebook showed me. So, and he discusses a little bit about Facebook algorithms and how they're kind of a mystery, but they're definitely paying attention to the activity that we engage in. And so he said, it's kind of funny. He starts out by saying, the first thing I liked was living social. My friend Jay had liked it before me, and it was sitting at the top of my feed. So I liked it, and I liked 2 more updates from friends. So far, so good. But the next thing I encountered, I didn't really like. I mean, I don't really like living social either, whatever that is, but who cares? He says, the fourth thing I liked was something I actively disliked. It was a bad joke or a dumb one, but I liked it anyway. So then he goes on, he likes articles from Modern Farmer about cows, things that he has no interest in. And then he also set up, how like if you like something, then now Facebook will give you like 4 suggestions of, hey, you like that, you might also like this. So he said that just takes you into like a swirling vortex of endless suggestions. So he set a rule that he will only like the first 4 related stories that they give you and no more. But he didn't disregard the related stories. He liked the first 4. And so then he started noticing that the thing that was getting frustrating to him was that he was having to like political posts that were completely against his personal political ideology. I think he's somewhat liberal, and he started liking all of these conservative things that were coming through his feed. And then he's like, but on top of that, I liked things that normally I would just glance over. He's like, I liked Kohl's department store. I actually liked Kohl's for you. So anyway, he started noticing that his Facebook feed took an entirely new character in a surprisingly short amount of time. After checking in and liking a bunch of the stuff over the course of an hour, he said it strangely transitioned to he was no longer seeing human beings in his feed anymore. It became all about brands and messaging. And he said, likewise, the content mills like Upworthy and that kind of thing, they rose to the top. He went to bed one night, and then when he woke up, scrolled through his news feed, and the updates were in order. Huffington Post, Upworthy, Huffington Post, Upworthy, a Levi's ad, space.com, Huffington Post, Upworthy, Huffington Post, space.com, Upworthy, space.com.
Wow.
So, yeah. And then he started noticing that he was getting bombarded with political stuff. Even if it was liberal or conservative, it didn't matter. Facebook read, you like politics, here's a bunch of politics stuff. So he had uber right-wing stuff, and then he had uber left-wing stuff like Rachel Maddow, Mother Jones, Daily Kos, all of that. So he said on his mobile, his mobile Facebook app completely eliminated all human interaction for him. Now it was nothing but a series of ads, sponsored ads, and links. His actual, through his PC, he could still see what his friends shared, but it was like an afterthought. But then he said the interesting thing is, after a brief period where he was getting bombarded with politics, getting bombarded with social issues and that type of thing that people were clearly driving, he said suddenly my Facebook just became nonsense, like full of quizzes and BuzzFeed stuff, and Katy Perry's backup dancer is the man candy you deserve. And just crazy stuff. Check out this picture of this baby that looks exactly like Jay-Z, and I've actually seen that one go through my feed. So all of this stuff, and he said the interesting thing is he finally decided that he should post a status update on his own Facebook just to see if anyone else saw it. So he wrote an update that just said, I like you. And he said suddenly people were coming out of the woodwork and exposed him to a completely unexpected scenario, which was that his liking activity was affecting his friends. His friends started saying that his weirdo activity had been overrunning their feeds. Like someone said to him, my newsfeed is 70% of things that you liked. And it'll say, Matt liked this, Matt suggests this, Matt wants you to go see this. And one of his other friends said, my Facebook feed is literally full of stuff that you like. No friend stuff, just stuff that you like. And so then they were getting frustrated with him. Some people were sending him messages like, I think you've been hacked. And then ultimately, he heard from someone who worked at Facebook who noticed his activity and wanted to connect him with the company's PR department. So all of this to say, he ends the article in a really interesting way. He writes, by liking everything, I turned Facebook into a place where there was literally nothing to like. I didn't like what I had done. And now you and I know that the things that you like and the ways that you interact with people on Facebook does affect what shows up in your feed, the different suggestions, but it's becoming more and more and more prevalent to where I see a lot more advertising and a lot more suggested links than I ever did before. So what does this mean? Should we stop liking anything on Facebook so that people don't know, so that Facebook doesn't know what kind of ads to deliver us? Would that stop them? Would they just start guessing at what to send us? I found this article to be such an interesting little experiment that he did.
Yeah, that is interesting. The small business owner in me understands that Facebook's putting this out there for free for all of us, and they have to generate revenue.
Sure.
So that's why they have these feeds going, and I mean, I'm sure that they spend millions on trying to figure out the algorithms. But it is annoying. I mean, I hate it when I have my Facebook. Well, first of all, I have a blocker in there for ads because I just can't take them. They drive me crazy. And I have it set so that I see all of my friends' activity and not so much the other stuff because, yeah, I mean, I want to know what my friends are up to and what the people that are in my circle and are like-minded are doing. I don't really care about all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to say, I mean, yeah, we can sit here and criticize and bitch and moan about it. But it's this amazing service that's set up for us that we don't have to pay for, so I'm sensitive to that. I do hate constant marketing. I mean, every time I get involved in anything that's marketing to me constantly, I just see, Luke Wilson and Idiocracy going on in the back of my head because it just feels like that's the road we're headed down. But I guess that is the road we're headed down because the commodity of the world right now is information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think literally everyone is on Facebook. Like the world is on Facebook. And so it is this ripe for the picking opportunity for not only Facebook, but also advertisers who connect with Facebook to reach an audience of people who are going to be on Facebook, whether or not they, no matter what they do. But as I was thinking about this and as I'm seeing the way Facebook is changing and evolving into really heavy on the suggestions and backing away from personal interaction with people that you actually know, I wonder what it's going to do to Facebook. Is it going to either kill Facebook eventually because it's kind of changing what Facebook what everybody likes about Facebook, which is the social networking aspect, or is it going to just change the way we interact with Facebook? Is it going to become less about, conversations and interacting and sharing with people that we know, and more about sharing things that we like? In that way, does it become just rather than interactivity driven, does it become ego driven? Like everybody out there wants to know what I like. Everybody out there wants to know the things that I buy, the things that I enjoy. And all it is just, you know what I'm saying? Like everybody out there just talking about what it is that they like. And it's really interesting because this article starts with a quote from Andy Warhol, a really famous quote that says, I think everybody should like everybody. And it's like such a bumper sticker phrase, and it's kind of a feel-good phrase. Like, yeah, everybody should like everybody. But people don't realize the full context of what Andy Warhol had said, which I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he relates it to everybody should think alike. He relates it to communism, but that it's not necessarily, they didn't carry it out the right way. But he says, pop art is all about liking things and being like a machine. And he says I think everybody should be a machine. And in this way, I think everybody should like everybody, because you do the same thing every time. You do it over and over again, and ultimately it becomes repetitive and it becomes habitual to always like things. And in his mind, that meant that the world would be a better place if we habitually liked everything. And so it was sort of forecasting, how Facebook, we don't have the option to dislike.
I know.
We don't even have the option to be neutral.
I know. We have to either like it or nothing, I guess. So what will become of Facebook? Well, most likely it will be taken over by something else, because all the little idiosyncrasies that piss people off will get some entrepreneur out there to create a new community. I mean, look what happened to MySpace.
Yeah.
They'll create a new community that people will go to and they'll like, and then what will happen is the new community will get infiltrated by marketing and opportunists, and it'll get destroyed and it'll move on to something else. I mean, I don't think that anything is forever.
Right.
In the world that we live in now, I mean, Facebook's had a pretty good run, but I know that there's other platforms out there that are trying to do it as well, and MySpace is trying to make a comeback. So who knows, that Facebook probably needs to be careful and then have their finger on the pulse of all this, because, they could die. MySpace died fast.
It did, like overnight, and I really liked MySpace. I was really a fan of MySpace, and I was like one of the last hanger-on people to make the switch, and I only switched because pretty much nobody else was on MySpace anymore, so I couldn't interact with people. But the downfall of MySpace largely had to do with it trying to be too much like Facebook. It started changing to having news feeds instead of just, the thing I liked about MySpace was that you had more of a profile. You could almost create sort of this online visual representation of who you are. Yeah. And then people could interact with one another almost as though they were going to this person's house, and talking to them or whatever. And there's pros and cons, but it was a completely different type of thing than Facebook is. And now, but then towards the end, MySpace was trying to implement Facebook type things, and then it just collapsed because it was no longer what it was before. So I kind of wonder if that's what's going to happen with Facebook, is that it's going to collapse under the weight of its going too far away from what it started as.
It could be. What the kids are into now is Tumblr. The kids don't even like Facebook. So
yeah, and Tumblr is a lot more like MySpace, actually.
I don't know. I went on Tumblr like twice. I haven't put any effort into that. I can't keep up with all the stuff you got to do to have a business these days, man.
I know. But there's things waiting in the wings like Pinterest, Tumblr, all of these other things. Of course, Twitter is its own thing now. I tend to think that Twitter is on the verge of overtaking Facebook. Now everybody is going to have to summarize their thoughts into 145 characters, and it further eliminates the direct interaction aspect, but it's more voyeuristic in a way. I don't know. There's just, it's hard to say, but in any case, I found the article interesting because of not only what it physically did to Facebook when the guy liked everything, but what it kind of did to him and how it affected his friends, and how it sort of built some animosity between him and his friends, and how liking everything made him like nothing. I thought that was really fascinating.
It's very philosophic truth there.
Yeah. Yeah, become almost resentful of how difficult it is to have to be liking everything all the time. It's really interesting. Yeah. So anyway, that's my first one.
Well, that was very interesting. All right. My first one comes from the Canadian National Post. Mm-hmm. And this is actually a rehash of an article that I'm sure you will remember came out last year. It was this big deal of these two guys in the UK that started this giant atheistic megachurch.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
Yeah. Well, it almost seemed like it was a joke. I remember I read probably 2 or 3 different articles about that whole thing, and I just thought, I almost felt like they were making a mockery of churches. But anyway, here we are a year later, and this article is talking about these new atheistic church models coming to the United States. And what happened was these 2 comedians that put together this Sunday assembly model in the UK turned it into some sort of franchise type thing. I mean, they have a full-on, I guess you would call it a denomination, and you apply for a grant to open your own Sunday assembly is what it's called. Well, they have had over the last year 400 of these applications come into them to open up these churches, and 150 of them are in America.
Wow.
And this particular article is talking about a giant one that just opened up. Well, I guess I don't know if it just opened up. It doesn't say when, but it's about this giant one that is in Nashville amidst the Bible Belt. And so the article just goes on to talk about the kind of people that are going and the reasons that they're going. And I guess what I found interesting and I thought might be a point of conversation was some of the reasons that people said that they're going to these churches. There's one gentleman said that the Sunday assembly provides a welcome opportunity to belong to something without having to believe in anything. That, you know what I mean? That's just weird. Here's another one that says the idea is not to steal all the good bits about church. No, the idea is why not steal all the good bits about church, the music, the fellowship, the community, the work, and then just lose all the God stuff.
It kind of reminds me of like a Unitarian Universalist, except where the Unitarian Universalists would embrace all paths leading to God. This is another way of having that same sort of church-type fellowship, but no God.
But no God, right. Another person was saying, I just want to get away from the idea that you have to have God to be a good person. Certainly there are very upstanding citizens who are morally upright that aren't Christians, but this total rejection of God I find very sad, actually. In closing out the article, they go on to talk about kind of what they do in the service. They get together and they sing and they have like bands playing secular songs, and they'll have people talk about a lot of self-help and stuff like that. But they've tried to make it more upbeat because they said that most of the humanist congregations in the past have been very intellectual. They, they'll play classical music and then they'll talk about some social concerns and maybe, just a little bit too highbrow talk. This Sunday assembly model is what they call this. It's like an evangelical Christian church, but without God. There's music and clapping and active participation and short talks and humor and pop music. And they even go on to say that every day or every service, they have a long moment of silence. And during this moment of silence, they're told to, quote, turn down their inner volume knob and be grateful to the impersonal universe that you have a place and people in it that love you.
My goodness. First of all, it obviously speaks to sort of this sort of innate human need for fellowship. That it's something that we all seek, and the fact that it's in that particular form that they're coming around to seeking it in, it kind of makes me think of the conundrum of the atheist being dogmatically religious about their atheism.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a religion, right?
Right.
It's the definition of a religion.
Absolutely. It's so much so that they have to come up with terms like the impersonal force of the universe or what have you, because I think that they inherently know that there is something beyond and outside of themselves, but it would be blasphemy in the religion of atheism to call it God or to even call it give it a personality, Mm-hmm. So let's call it impersonal. And let's call it the universe, because that's sort of this catch-all thing, and it sounds very science-y and not spiritual, but it is spirituality, and it's right on the cusp of admitting that there is something greater than ourselves.
It is. It's oxymoronic.
It really is. It's fascinating. I don't think that these people even realize that in their quest to find fellowship with other atheists, they are trying to fill a void that they are willfully coming against with their own dogmas, their own beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. They're congregating together to fill a need that they are saying doesn't exist.
Yeah. Really, really ironic and very interesting, because I would love to sit down and just have a pleasant conversation with someone who is a member of a congregation like this. I would love to just have an open and honest conversation with them about why they feel, why if there is no God, and why if there is no need for a God, do you find this necessary? Why isn't getting together with a group of friends to go sit and have dinner together? Why doesn't that suffice? Why the religious overtones? Why is that becoming necessary for you? And why go so far as to model it after something that you proclaim to find foolish?
Mm-hmm. In the final analysis, it's absurd. And that's why I really thought it was a joke, but
yeah,
I guess it's not.
It's actually quite sad. And like I said, I've had the same sort of reaction to these universalist type churches, Unitarian Universalist type churches, where they want church. They want what feels like a religious environment without let's just say it, without the consequences, So it seems like they want everything that religion, quote, has to offer without the consequences, or without the morality, the higher power, that type of thing. They want everything that goes with it without having to accept
or submit.
Right.
Yeah. They don't want to submit to any authority.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it's just it's a refutation of anybody having any sort of authority over ourselves.
And as it progresses, the particularly ironic thing about it is that they will start instituting all of those things. Eventually, there will be a hierarchy if they want to keep these things functioning, within any sort of realm of order. There will become politics involved. There will become rules involved. Eventually, they'll have to have a mission statement or a statement of their beliefs or lack thereof.
We believe in nothing.
We believe in nothing. If you believe in anything, you're out. you're quote unquote damned. But it will become that way. And at what point will they just admit that this is the church of atheism, where we believe in our unbelief, Very interesting.
All right, well, what do you have for the next one?
Well, my next one is something really offbeat and weird, but it's something that I had personally observed not too long ago. And so this woman wrote an article about it for New York Times Magazine. And it's called A Mother's Journey Through the Unnerving Universe of Unboxing Videos. So I don't know if people out there know what an unboxing video is, but it's this latest trend on YouTube where literally you just watch someone. You don't even see the person. You just see their hands. And they're taking a new item that is still boxed and opening it and taking it out of the box and showing you what it looks like when it's out of the box. That is literally all there is to it. Now, this woman, she started noticing that her kids were crazy about these videos, that they were really enamored. And there's one particular one, the most popular one. She calls herself Disney Collector. Her real name is Melissa Lima, and she's only 21 years old. She's a native of Brazil. She now lives in New York. She has no children of her own, but she makes these videos of herself unpackaging things, whether it's toys, Play-Doh sets, really simple chintzy playthings. And you never see her face. You only see her hands. Her most popular video has had 90 million hits. And all it is her, you can buy those little Easter eggs, plastic eggs, and then you open them up and they've got like a little toy or something inside. Mm-hmm. It's just her opening these Angry Birds eggs to reveal the prize inside. 90 million hits. So the mother, who found out that her kids were crazy about these videos, kind of got disturbed about it, but she couldn't quite put her finger on why it disturbed her. She was like, there was something almost mildly pornographic about it, just watching these people's hands caressing these items as they slowly unboxed them and revealing what was inside. And it disturbed her. And so she started trying to ask her children, like, why do you like these videos? And the kids would say, because I liked it. I like it a lot. I like to see something shiny and new. And it kind of comes from the whole excitement that kids have on Christmas morning with unboxing their presents. But what is the appeal of seeing someone else opening something that you don't have, that you don't get to play with or enjoy? This woman, Disney Collector, is on track to raking in between $2 and $13 million in advertising just from these unboxing videos. She's the most successful unboxing video creator of all time, but there are people waiting in the wings that are doing the same thing. And you can find unboxing videos of everything from, say, like opening a $5,000 Louis Vuitton purse, watching someone take the tags off of it and getting excited because, I would love to be able to have my own Louis Vuitton purse. But interestingly, the most successful of these unboxing videos are really little, inexpensive toys. And so this woman, she decided she was just going to sit and just follow the YouTube rabbit trail and watch all of these videos and just see what happened. And she said she started with watching an unboxing of a $12,000 Birkin bag. Then she watched someone open a MacBook. Then she watched someone open Louboutin pumps, headphones, Nike sneakers, flip-flops, all the way down to a video called Unboxing My New Hanes Briefs 7-pack. And she's like, and these videos are in HD. But she says her last video that she got to was a man opening a $2 Bic pen, unboxing it with trembling hands, taking it out of the packaging and then writing on a piece of paper with it. And she said she just felt empty as she watched this, and zombified and drained and just overwhelmed, emptied and stoned is the way she describes it, having viewed too many hands with no faces. But then she admits, as I watched the man take out his little plastic pen, I'll admit that I did think, ooh, I love the feeling of a fresh new ballpoint when you get it on the paper and the ink flows for the first time. And she recognized that little adrenaline rush because it was something that she wished she could be a part of right at that moment. So I found this to be so interesting because it speaks to a lot of different things. It speaks to consumerism. It speaks to the dopamine rush that comes from the excitement of revealing something that you just bought. But also it speaks to this culture we live in now where it's not even about having the thing. It's about the experience of the thing. You don't even have to have it in front of you anymore. You get excited about other people shopping. You get excited about other people getting new things. And inevitably, it makes you want to get new things, and it makes you want to do that yourself. But for the time being, the adrenaline rush of watching someone else do it will suffice. And it's really weird because it made me think of a lot of these movies where they talk about the near future and the types of TV shows that we'll watch and that type of thing, where we become so obsessed with mass consumerism that our idea of entertainment is watching someone else open their groceries or open their purchases. And I don't know what it all means. Why is this person getting 90 million views for opening toys?
I got to ask you something. Are you implying when you said she was getting money that these manufacturers are paying per click?
No, I don't think so. I think what it is like Google AdSense. I think she puts advertising Google through her videos. So whenever people watch her videos, if they click on the Google ad, then she gets a percentage of the ad click revenue. And I think that's literally where she's getting her money. Okay. And I wouldn't be surprised if now, because she's become so popular, people are sending her toys or stuff like, here, make a video of opening this, you know. Uh-huh. But I think her financial revenue from the way it reads is coming from ad click revenue.
Okay, so that was very strange. I've never heard of this before. Had you heard it before you came across that article?
I did, just because I happened upon it in a YouTube search for something completely unrelated. And I don't remember what that was anymore, but I happened upon it, and I think it was this exact same person, this Disney collector gal. And it was her opening up a fresh box of Play-Doh, taking each individual thing of Play-Doh out, and then just sort of smushing it in her hands and to show what it looked like, and showing the insides of each container and stuff like that. And I was just like, who is watching this? And then I saw that many, many millions of people clearly had been watching this. So what is that?
Well, the first word that came to mind as you were describing all this was voyeuristic. Mm-hmm. And it is creepy. Yeah. It is creepy in a really weird way. And the more I thought about it, I'm wondering, are we feeding envy and covetousness? And is that, that is the root. And we've talked about this recently. Mm-hmm. The root of all sin is what Paul tells us, is coveting, is the absolute root, because anytime you're unhappy with your situation and you're not content and you're displeased with where you are coveting something because God hasn't given it to you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if we're fostering the very, very basest of sin with that, or not that we're fostering it, but that's what it's appealing to. That is the thing that makes you wanna watch it. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to watch one to see, to see what kind of feelings I would get. But just as listening to you describe it, it just seems like she said, pornographic. It's voyeuristic. It's weird. And then when you went on to say what is our entertainment going to be like in the future, I'm back to the same movie as I was the last article, Idiocracy. Do you remember what the two highest rating shows were in that movie?
I do. That's what came to my mind as well.
One was, it's just called Butt, right? And the other one is Ow, My Balls. Yep.
The saddest part is I think both of our husbands would probably tune in to those channels.
Oh, I know. Ouch, My Balls. That one would get laughter for a while.
I know. But it also made me think of, I'm getting an echo now. But it also made me think of, like when we watch these shows on TV, like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous used to be the big one, but now you have like the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and on MTV they have that horrible show My Super Sweet 16, where you just get to sit and watch these bratty children of ultra wealthy people have these elaborate, amazing parties that ultimately always end in them getting some $100,000 vehicle as a gift and spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on their parties. Or the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, where we watch these women go everywhere in limousines and buy the most amazing designer clothes, and we follow their lives. It's the same reason that we watch. Everybody is just watching, wrapped with awe about what Paris Hilton is up to, because we want that. We might make fun of them and say, oh, that girl is so pathetic, but in our hearts we're thinking, I want to have all of those things. I want to live that kind of life. Why can't I have that? And so maybe the YouTube version, where you're watching a guy taking his underwear out.
But you can have those underwear, really. I mean, that's not out of reach.
Right. But it's more about, it not necessarily maybe about, in that case, what he's opening, but the fact that he has something new. Right. He has something new. He just went shopping. He bought something. He's taking out of the box. I love that feeling. I love getting new things. I love opening it up. I love the feeling of fresh underwear when I first take it out. Whatever the case is, it's that feeling. It's that excitement of stuff, Yeah. And it's disturbing.
It's disturbing, and it's destroying our culture.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I expect it to continue down that road. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, as our zombie mass consumerized culture just keeps going forward, just like with Facebook, where it's less about human interaction and it's more about the marketing. Well, that's what this is too. It's less about seeing someone's face and hearing them do a vlog where they talk about things that interest them. Now it's about watching just their hands as they caress their new item that they just bought. It's sick. It's
reductionism too. I mean, we're almost down to staring at a screen with a butt on it.
Mhm. Yeah. Truthfully. Okay, so let's hear your next one.
Okay, back to me.
Yeah.
We are going to talk about this might be a little bit. Our articles are kind of similar. This article comes from Maclean's, and it is about neighbors. The article is called "The End of Neighbors." It's a very long article. It's very interesting, and I would encourage anybody who finds this discussion interesting to read the whole article, because it goes into a whole lot more than what we're going to talk about now. But what this article is talking about is our neighbors, where we live, our neighborhoods. And it is a study done by two authors who did some surveys in Canada, in the United States, in Australia, and in Great Britain. So 4 very westernized countries, and they wanted to find out how many people knew their neighbors, how many people interacted with their neighbors, what kind of things went on in neighborhoods. And what they have found, not surprising, I don't think anybody will find this surprising, but that less than 50% of Americans know the names of their neighbors. They don't even know their names. They asked other questions like, could you pick your neighbors out of a lineup? And there was 35% of the people that said they would not even be able to pick a neighbor out of a group of people standing in a line. And it goes on to correlate the lack of this type of interaction that we used to have with our neighbors as causing problems, not just socially, but actual physical problems. The one woman says that having a tight-knit group of friends who regularly gather to eat, and most crucially, get this is the most important thing that people do when they get together, gossip. Mm-hmm. They live an average of 15 years longer than people who are loners. Research shows that this type of activity, the social activity, face-to-face social activity, fortifies the immune system, calibrates hormones, and increases the chances of surviving heart attacks, strokes, AIDS, and cancer. People with the most integrated social lives, overlapping relationships among friends, families, sports, and other recreational or religious pursuits have the best prognoses for all major illnesses. It also has a really large effect on dementia. So they're saying that the lack of this middle ring of interaction, which is this article talks about 3 rings of interaction. We have our family, which is our inner ring, and then our outer ring is like our acquaintances, and that includes, they say, your social group online, which there is a lot of benefit to that, but it's different than this middle ring of people that they consider like people that you go to, say you meet at the gym, or people that you work with, or your neighbors, because these people are not necessarily chosen because of a like-mindedness. They are people that you kind of have to figure out how to get along with because you either work with them or you live next to them. And it's a different kind of cognitive exercise to try to work out problems. You know, if your neighbor, you got to build a fence, and who's going to pay for what kind of fence, and I'll do half and you do half. Working out these kind of problems is a different kind of cognitive process than interacting with your family and then interacting with your outer ring. And they're saying that this middle ring relationship is causing these health problems. Now, it goes on to talk about why this is. And of course, when I was reading the article, I was for sure thinking that they were going to say it's the fault of the internet because people isolate and they are in their house and they're on Facebook and they're doing whatever. But in fact, it says that the internet has been a reaction to this problem, and that this problem has been going on as a reaction to both members or all members of the family working, people taking jobs that are not necessarily local, so they're spending more time on the road, so that in effect, all these neighborhoods that people want to live in, and they want to raise their children in these wonderful neighborhoods with all these neighbors. In fact, these neighborhoods are empty most of the time because everybody's at work and the kids are at daycare or school or at some activity. And so the whole neighborhoods are families are losing that whole feeling of interaction where the kids would play with each other when they get home from school, and you know, mom in house A was in charge when all the kids were there, and now our kids don't do that anymore. Our kids are constantly being farmed out to camps and daycare and after school programs and before school programs and the why, and that this whole thing is really affecting our lives physically, mentally. It goes on to talk about how it's affecting politics, how it's causing division, putting people into these boxes where people are so divided because now we don't have those interactions with people that we don't choose. We go online and we choose the people that we interact with online, and we interact with our families, and these other groups of people that tend to come in when we leave our houses. That whole group of learning how to deal with people that are not necessarily like us or not necessarily who we've chosen, that it's causing a lot of the huge divisions that are going on, not just in America, but in the other westernized countries.
Well, the first thing that I think of when I hear you read that article is my own experience growing up. And I was one of these trailer park kids. We lived in a trailer park that was sort of in a rural area just outside of town. And so much so that we didn't have city water. We had well water. So if we wanted city water, we had to go into town and fill jugs and what have you. And I think a lot of people would say that doesn't sound like a great life, but it was actually. And the reason is because it was this little community, very tight knit, and all of us kids were friends. All of us kids would hang out together, all ages. I'm talking like from grade school up to like middle school and even, high school age sometimes. All of us kids, especially in the summertime, 10 o'clock in the morning, Mom would boot you out the door and she would just tell you to play all day, just go find something to do, come back at, supper time, whatever. And you would just go outside and you would run into all of these kids whose parents had done the same thing. And you would just find something to do. You just interacted with one another. You played together. You had this camaraderie, where you were all you had. We couldn't go anywhere else. We were confined to this little area, so we just played together. And then the other side of that is that all of the parents knew one another, and all of the parents interacted. And if there was a problem with one of the kids, the parents would have no problem going to the parents of that kid and saying something because they knew each other. They had each other's phone numbers, or they could just go to the door and talk to them. They would sit and have coffee together sometimes if the kids were out playing. It was this really strong community vibe. And it's something that in my lifetime, since then, I've never re-experienced. I do not live in a situation like that now. I have not lived in a situation like that previously, after leaving that particular environment. And it's really sad because I can see how it benefited all of us. I can see how it would benefit obviously us kids. We never got bored. We never really got into trouble because there was this accountability. It wasn't like you could hang out with just the bad kids. You had the same kids to hang out with, whatever, and there was no such thing as like this kind of idea now of the play date. You just got kicked out. You're like, go play, and the parents weren't worried because they knew that there was this entire neighborhood of other parents watching what was going on. So everything was okay. And all of the parents trusted the other parents, within reason with their own kids.
And all the kids knew there was an eye on them anywhere they went.
Yep, absolutely. And then let's say, there was this one time where somebody came and broke into somebody's house, and instantly everyone was aware of it. Everyone went to go help that person. There was another time there was like this field just right outside of our little trailer park, and somebody started a fire, and everybody from the whole place, we didn't even call the fire department. Just all of the kids, all of the parents, we all went out there with buckets of water and put out the fire ourselves before it got to the houses. It was just this sort of unspoken camaraderie where we all helped each other out. And I have to wonder if that even for the most part exists anymore.
Well, I mean, it does. I think it does in some areas. Like we're very lucky here in Colorado. When we lived in Arizona, we lived in a place very much like what they're talking about here. Nice neighborhood, really well-kept yards. But we only knew one of our neighbors, the very next door neighbors, and that's only because we had like interests. We didn't know anybody else on the street. My daughter didn't know if there was any other kids on the street. She never played with anybody in the neighborhood. I had to do these stupid play dates where you had to, okay, we'll drive here and I'll drop you off at exactly 4 and we'll pick you up at 5:30. And, it was just this thing, and I just really hated it. And, and the neighborhood was very empty. It was a really nice neighborhood, but nobody was ever out and about. You never really saw anybody. And when we moved here to Colorado, we live in a rural community. So I suppose it has a lot to do with the difference. Out here where we are, almost everybody works from home. There's, we have a studio on our property. Everybody here either has a studio or a shop or an office on their property. So people are home all the time. The kids all know each other. They all hang out and ride their bikes and take off to the other farms or, whatever they're doing around here. So we do have that opportunity here, but it's very rare. I do know that. And I'm really, really grateful for it. Our community is really strong here, but I know for a fact that this is the exception to the rule.
Yeah. And I can even just see how it would contribute to physical health, because if you live in sort of this isolated manner and you don't have that sort of reassurance about your own home being, safe from the people around you or what your kids are up to or whatever, that can lead to stress, that can lead to situations of distrust, which causes anxiety, and we all know that stress and anxiety contribute to a lot of physical maladies, and whereas if you have that sort of sense of comfort and safety in your own surroundings, because you do know the people around you and you do know that if something horrible happened, you wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable to go to your neighbor and say, I need help, that would relieve a lot of those feelings of stress and anxiety just in your immediate surroundings. So I think that's really interesting, and I hadn't really thought about it in that regard. I had thought about it, as you say, in the sort of social media aspect of how we don't have a whole lot of as much human interaction, where I could physically reach out and put my hand on you type thing, as we used to. But I never really thought of that as being a response to a problem that already existed.
Yeah, and I have to kind of reiterate again that the thing that I really found so fascinating was, because this article goes on to explain even more stuff about how this type of relationship that we aren't it's this cognitive process that we are not engaging in anymore, where we just simply do not interact with very many people that we are not homogenous with, because all of our in the isolation that we live in now, we tend to only interact with people that are of like mind or that we choose to interact with. It goes on to talk about, this was something that I really thought was interesting, that back, whenever, they're probably talking about the 50s or 60s or whatever, even people could unite over, say, a television show, because there was only 3 channels, and so that meant there was only 3 shows you could be watching during prime time. So people even had, they had similarities in their experience of watching I Love Lucy or whatever, and now I guess the most common show, the most popular show on television only gets 8 to 10% of the entire population watching it, so we can't even unite around that. So everybody's like just getting into these smaller and smaller factions, and this interpersonal skill of learning how to deal with people that don't have exactly the same interests as you is, I can really see how that is a health issue, especially when they're talking about dementia and cancer, because a lot of cancers come from stress.
Yeah, exactly. And it really thinks, on a somewhat lighter note, it really makes me remember I think it was just like last week or the week before, this comedy video that I had shared on my wall that another friend of mine had initially shared. And it's this comedian. His name is Sebastian. He's kind of like this New York guy. And I know you remember it, but the whole little skit or routine that he does speaks exactly to this article that you're citing, because his whole thing is about when the doorbell rings.
I was sitting in my house a couple weeks ago, just relaxing. My doorbell rang. This is weird. It's a different feeling when your doorbell rings today opposed to 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago, your doorbell rang. That was a happy moment in your house. It's called company. Be sitting there on a Thursday night watching TV. Your doorbell rang, the whole family shot off the couch. Oh my God! Put the lights on, somebody's here! We got people! The whole family went to the door. The kids were in socks, they slid up to the door. Nobody looked to see who it was. Right? You just opened up the door. You were like, oh my God, look at that. Look at who's here. And you'd ask them, what the hell are you doing here? And the person would be like, I was in the neighborhood. I thought I might stop by, see how the kids are doing. They're like, oh, come on in. We're going to have some cake. Your mother had a little Entenmann's. Maybe some Sara Lee crumble cake. Just in case company came over. She made an announcement when she bought it. She's like, listen, nobody touch this cake. This is for company only. Those crap muffins, those are for you people. You better hope to God somebody comes over so we could cut the cake. She put her cake in the middle of the table, proud of it. Right? She put it right in the middle. Cut yourself a slice. Want a cup of coffee? We're gonna do want some Sanka? Yeah, that's old school. A lot of the young kids are looking at me like, what is that, an iPhone app? What the hell is Sanka? Your mother had a tin, brown and orange tin of Sanka, ready to go just in case the company. She put a big pot on the table. Go ahead. Nobody had a cell phone back then. If your house phone did ring, your father stood up and said, nobody get that phone. We got company. And you lost track of time. 2 hours went by. You were like, we got to get out of here. That's okay. Next time we're going to come by you. Be like, yeah, my door's always open. Now your doorbell rings? It's like, what the f***? Right, your own mother's crawling across the kitchen floor. Get down now, army crawl. Army crawl, get in the closet. Go get the sword in the living room. Somebody get the sword underneath the couch in the living room. There's a sword.
Why is this person here? Who's at the door?
What do they want?
Turn off the lights. And it's sadly true. I mean, it's a completely different environment, and I think that it's to the detriment of us as a society, really. Okay, well, for my last one, we're gonna be moving out of this kind of theme that we're in and into one of my favorite topics, which is dystopia. And anyone who knows me knows that my pretty much favorite genre of fiction is dystopian fiction, near future or far future dystopian type scenarios where technology has changed the landscape and rendered us, changed in a dramatic sense. And we can look to books like 1984, Brave New World, things like that to get an idea of what I mean by dystopia. So in Wired magazine on August 14th, a guy named Michael Solana wrote an editorial, an op-ed that he titles, "Stop Writing Dystopian Sci-Fi, It's Making Us All Fear Technology." And his primary argument is that while the world continues to advance technologically and it's opening these doors to all of these wonderful, amazing new opportunities on the landscape, dystopian type of film or book or fiction in general is creating a sense that people are afraid of what technology will provide. It sees the scientists as villains, and when we hear about artificial intelligence, we automatically think of the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica instead of thinking about the ways that it could help us and serve us and push us forward. So that is his argument. Now, the article that I'm bringing to the table is not that op-ed, but it's an editorial response to that, which was written by Devin Maloney, and he writes, "No, dystopian sci-fi isn't bad for society. We need it more than ever." And I am going to be agreeing with the opinions put forth by Devin. And his argument is that there's undoubted truth to what Michael Solana says in his editorial, with widespread surveillance, militarization of police, data mining, all of these things. People are obviously skeptical of technology and what the advancement of technology means. But Devin puts forth that the editorial of Michael Solana, his accusation that an influx of dystopian fiction is guilty of somehow exacerbating this fear, is inaccurate. His suggestion is that dystopian fiction mimics what it actually feels to already be in the world. So if people end up getting scared, that's because the world is scary. That's his idea. And he puts out this set of research where, of course, the Michael Solana would suggest that people have this inherent fear of technology. So Devin says that there's this Pew Research Center internet project that did this survey that proves that people don't fear technology. 59% of those surveyed earlier this year reported that they feel optimistic about the future overall, although interestingly, women were significantly less hopeful than men, but that it's only when you get into the morality of it, the moral minutia of what the future means. Should we alter our DNA? Should we, increase our efforts with regard to artificial intelligence? That is the only time that a sentiment similar to fear of technology starts to arise. So what it proves is technology in and of itself is not what scares people. It's the way we use technology. And that is the reason why dystopian fiction can actually be beneficial to society going forward, because it tends to identify these things that we already recognize around us and show in a meaningful way what could happen if we lose control over that trajectory. He goes on to talk about how there's this dramatic explosion, especially in the young adult genre, especially in the female young adult genre of dystopia. When you look at the Hunger Games, when you look at Divergent, that whole series, focusing very much on a world that has been undermined by technology, and now it's sort of more an agrarian type society, or in the case of the Hunger Games and Divergent, it's sort of this Big Brother type society with surveillance and control grids. But he says blaming a lack of technological positivity on fiction, especially when there is so much technological positivity in our daily lives, discounts the deep significance and increasing value of dystopian fiction and its ability to keep us on our toes in our daily lives. And I think that's a really, really good point. So when we say that, when someone suggests that this type of fiction breeds fear, the author of this editorial suggests that it doesn't in fact breed fear, it actually breeds a cautionary tone to us. So he says There's a reason why books like 1984 and Brave New World are cornerstones in curricula and have been for decades. A healthy dose of skepticism and the ability to intelligently criticize are two of the most important foundational qualities an educated general public must have to maintain autonomy and power in a quickly changing world. If we were to stop writing and publishing dystopian science fiction, we would lose a precious, absolutely crucial tool in our ability to maintain a level head about technology and its advancement. And that is the point that I am the most moved by in what he wrote, because I tend to agree that dystopian future science fiction fosters in us a very healthy skepticism about the trajectory that we're currently on. It makes us critical in a positive way, and it gives us the sort of understanding that, there is this future out there. We're not living directly in each individual moment. We are able to take a larger bird's eye view of one potential scenario if things are left unchecked. So I really, really appreciated this editorial, not only because I love dystopian fiction and because I love any defense thereof. Some of my favorite books are like The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I love Children of Men. I love even, Brave New World, 1984, Fahrenheit 451. All of these books have helped me to understand not only a potential future for us, but they've helped me in understanding the world that I currently live in. So I defend absolutely dystopian fiction, and I don't see anything dangerous or wrong about it.
Well, I have to agree with you.
Good.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you 100%, and I think that we can call into just proof texts, if you would, the fact that we all did, in fact, have to read 1984 and Brave New World when we were in high school. And granted, I was in high school a lot longer ago than you were. But how many times since we read those things have we looked around the world today and said, whoa, how often have things been labeled Big Brother, and how often do you hear in the headlines newspeak, and how often do you hear somebody just throw the word soma around? Mm-hmm. Because it's important, because it's a point of discussion. It's why these things should be in the curriculum. It's why I will argue momentarily for the classics in general. That these things do need to be part of a curriculum for children and young adults to move forward to, because then it becomes a point of commonality that people can talk about and point to when you're discussing what you're seeing. When you see that Big Brother thing, everybody knows what it means. If we pull those points where people can all go back and know and have a touch point where everybody knows what you're talking about. Because with all of the information that is available to us today, there has to be some points of commonality where people can be speaking the same language for a few minutes anyway. And the dystopian novels of the past look at where we are. Those were written in the 30s and 40s, 1984 and Brave New World, and they offered to the world two authors who could see the direction that the culture was going, and it offered two possible outcomes for the way things were looking. And if you take a look at where we are right now, you would see a very odd and strange melding of like the 1984 brave new 1984 world is where we live right now. Absolutely. In this very strange melding of the two. And as we look at the books and the movies that we have watched over the last decades, Terminator. I mean, how many times Do we hear Skynet being thrown around out there when we're talking about the NSA? Or one of my very favorite books turned movie is Minority Report. Mm-hmm. With the incessant marketing where you walk down the street and a thing pops in front of you and asks you how you liked the shirt you bought last week and lets you know they're on sale. And that kind of stuff is absolutely happening. So having some way to not be surprised by it, but you can say, whoa, I saw that in this movie, and what else was going on in this movie, or what else was going on in that book, and maybe it's something I should keep my eyes open to, I think is absolutely valuable.
Yeah, in fact, it really, when you bring up Minority Report, the targeted advertising in there kind of harkens back to what we were talking about with Facebook just a little bit ago.
It does.
It's you can see things evolving in that direction, and I think Philip K. Dick hit on that problem of advertising so brilliantly, and it really was somewhat prophetic in tone, and as many of his novels were, because he was sort of a psychedelic king of dystopia, really. He of course wrote Minority Report. He wrote the book that eventually became Blade Runner, which was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and that dealt more with AI and the problems of identifying the differences between an artificial intelligence and a human being. Those kinds of writers do a great service to us in a lot of ways, and I'm going to put forth an example, a real-time example of how something that I read in a dystopian fiction ended up being something that I witnessed in my daily life and caused me to think about a potential future trajectory. And this is the example of Children of Men. Now, if people aren't familiar with Children of Men, the story is essentially that it's a near future where, for some unknown reason, women stop being able to have children. There's lots of speculation as to whether it's something we ate, whether it's something in the water supply, something in the air, something genetic, whatever. Scientists are baffled. All they know is that we as human beings have stopped being able to procreate. And it's a scary scenario, and it obviously would lead to the utter collapse of humans as we know them. But the question is, and there's even a Lifetime show that is based somewhat on that book now, and it's called The Lottery, but it takes from the story of Children of Men, how women stop being able to have children, and then this Lifetime show, they talk about, whether cloning would be the answer to that problem. But when I first became aware of that story, I thought it was really interesting, and I thought of it in the sense of, food, water, what have you. But I was watching television one day, and there was this advertisement. We all know that these drug advertisements on TV from pharmaceutical companies have become a huge thing. Every show that you watch, one of the commercials, if not more, is going to be pushing some drug. Well, one of these commercials was for this new birth control. I can't remember if it was a pill or a contraption of some sort, but the point of it was for birth control. And one of the cautions that they listed was that your monthly cycle may stop, and in some women it never comes back. And obviously, if you're not having this natural monthly cycle, you are not your body is not doing what it needs to be fertile. And so I got to thinking, the more prevalent these types of drugs become, the more we are having women who may become infertile just in their quest to limit their fertility for a time. And what if that becomes part of their genetics and they pass it on to the next generation who, without having to take this drug, their bodies just do not have the menstruation and do not do the things required in order to create a healthy environment to carry children? What if this trait carries forward? It also made me think of the Gardasil vaccine, which all of these side effects that it has, supposedly it prevents cervical cancer, but there's so many instances where it talks about taking these teen and preteen girls and rendering them infertile. And what if this just would become through the adaptivity of our bodies something that is genetic. And going forward, women do become, as a part of their physiology, incapable or less likely to be able to bear children. And so reading this book about this fictional scenario made me recognize the potential hazards that currently exist in our society, and it made me ponder the dangers of these things just because it was suggested to me. I don't know that I would have necessarily thought that deeply about it had I not read Children of Men.
Well, I agree with you, and I think that as I'm thinking about this whole story and the article and talking about literature in general, I am thinking about a book that I read that was called The Closing of the American Mind. Have you ever read that? It's by Alan Bloom, and basically it's a book. He was a college professor, and it's a book that he wrote about how the modern public school system is just destroying people's ability to learn the way that we used to. The classic education is completely gone, and some of its effects going forward, and the trouble that he had. It's his story about the trouble that he has had in colleges trying to teach kids that came up through the K through 12 of the modern school system. And he writes about a whole bunch of different things, but one of the sections in his book is on literature, and how that when he was teaching, and this was in the 70s and the 80s, the kids were getting to him in college and hadn't read any of the classics, or very few, or just, looked at the Cliff Notes. And he talks about the effect that has on kids, and that literature in general being dropped from the curriculum is crippling kids' creativity, because the classics that we used to always read gave great stories. They gave great stories of heroes and villains and romance and horror, and some were of brutal crime, and some were of selfless sacrifice. And without having read these wonderful stories and having these ideas of morality or of evil in their minds, Shakespeare is just a wonderful example of just the there's so much philosophy in Shakespeare to glean from the tragedies and the comedies. And he's saying that those stories really round out an individual because they give them the opportunity to have role models. And without these types of stories that show the great contrast in life experience, that kids have no contact point with anything other than what they know to be true. So they have no other aspirations. If they're living a desperate life, they have no other aspirations to a hero that they read in a book. They only have what they see before them. They only have the possibility of conforming to some modern role model that they see with their eyes, and that they haven't had the opportunity to actually understand that there is another option out there. There is great beauty out there if they're in a place of despair.
Absolutely. And that is really something that gets overlooked in the dystopian genre, is that it does provide these wonderful heroes like Winston Smith from 1984, who fights against Big Brother in order to preserve his own individual liberty. And it really made me think of this other book, Utopia X. And I read it a number of years ago. I think I reviewed it on my site. But in that story, we have a similar hero to Winston Smith, but the idea in this story is something, once again, that if more people were to read this type of fiction, they could see it in their immediate surroundings. The idea of Utopia X is government mandated equality. And it's big on a world where political correctness has become the law. And as a result, this mandated equality becomes mandated inequality. And it is used as a weapon against the masses because, of course, if the government gets to determine what's politically correct and what isn't, obviously they're going to outlaw any sort of criticism about themselves. Right? And therefore a revolution is completely off the table because you can't even talk to your friends about it. Some goon is going to come in and carry you away. And so these types of stories really they aren't all doom and gloom. They actually provide us with ways to critically think about how to come against these types of things before they get to the level that we see in these fictional tales, because, like in Utopia X, it shows how without the ability to criticize the government, the power of the government continues to grow. And without the freedom to be able to criticize one another, whether it's in a constructive criticism manner, or quite frankly, just not liking someone else, when you outlaw that, it actually becomes a dystopian, totalitarian type of scenario, and you have these average Joes that rise up against the tyrants and they fight for their right to be critical. I love stories like that. It makes me think of Sinclair Lewis and his whole story, It Can't Happen Here, which ended up being essentially prophetic of like the Bush regime, of the never-ending wars, and what we've slid into that with Obama now and stuff like that. And Orwell spoke of that too, these wars that sort of almost become something that we just take for granted that they're always happening, but the reality is that there's more guns faced inward than there are outward. These are important stories to tell because they help us to be aware of things in real time and a potential trajectory of them. And the more people who are aware of it, the more people who can, as the generations go on, can be critical of these types of things. They can have skepticism, healthy skepticism of the direction that technology, power, and that type of thing is going. And they can maybe affect some positive change without being fearful of technology itself. That's why I just absolutely love the fact that this guy stood up and said, no, dystopian science fiction, dystopian fiction is not in any shape or form dangerous. In fact, it is not just healthy, but it's necessary.
Yeah, I wondered, the person who wrote the editorial saying that we needed to stop writing it almost scares me. Like that. Yep. Sounds like book burning almost, but yeah. But instead of burning him, we're just not even going to allow him to be written.
Right. I mean, he closes off his editorial by saying, it follows here that optimism is the new subversion. It's daring to care. The time is fit for us to dream again. So he is arguing for if we just nix dystopia altogether, then we can give people positive notions of AI, longevity therapy, biotechnology, nuclear energy. And if people would stop wasting their time being so skeptical and critical and maybe even a little fearful of these wonderful, brilliant things, then the world could be, dare I say, a brave new world.
I think so. It could be utopia.
Absolutely. So I'm going to put both editorials in the show notes and let people take a look and come to their own conclusions. But I am so excited, Diana, to hear what you've got for us for our final article.
Okay, for my final article, I actually might be breaking the rules, but I don't know that we've had enough rules established to actually be breaking them yet. But what I came across an article that I really liked, but I needed more, so I had to go then, in fact, get an additional article to bring some more information to the table.
I will allow it because I think my last one was an editorial and then another editorial.
Okay. All right. So we kind of are on the same page here.
Yeah.
The article that I ran across to begin my quest comes from Inside Science. And the article is named Going into a Trance to Play Music. And what this talks about is how musicians, especially very accomplished musicians, when they are really playing, tend to go into this this state that it's called the flow state. And I'm sure as a musician you have experienced this, and I have seen my husband, who is a musician and an artist, experience this, where you kind of just get into this mode where you're almost not thinking, where something else kind of is taking off, and you're playing. It's almost like an automatic kind of playing. Mm-hmm. And what it's talking about here is that this type of this flow state comes actually from muscle memory, and that it is developed in artists, musicians, whatever the case may be, through practice and through some innate talent, and that it actually changes your brain. And it talks about how this practice actually creates more gray matter in certain parts of your brain, so that your brain functions more efficiently, and that this efficiency helps to increase the filter that your brain has, so that when you're, in this instance as a musician, when you're playing, it tends to filter out everything else around you. Nothing else is noticed. You're swaying, and you're in the zone, and you're playing. And I thought this was really fascinating, just because I know that I've witnessed it, because I live with an artist. And but the reason that I wanted to go to find something else to kind of go with it is because this article focuses solely on musicians, and I happen to know that it affects talented people of all types. And what I got to thinking about was this word, the flow zone. And I was like, man, I know that word from somewhere. And it struck me that in our little book group that we have in our neighborhood that I go to on Tuesday nights, we actually read a book called Creativity by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I don't know if you know who he is. He is a he's called a positive psychologist. He studies motivation and is an instructor at the University of Chicago, and he did the big heavy research on this thing called the flow state, which the zone, whatever you want to call it, it's this this thing that happens to people who are very expressive in their talents. It's something that is known in musicians, artists, also athletes have this ability. And what it is this state where I'll just read a little bit here. The technical definition of this flow state, it's an actual studied state of mind, is the optimal state of consciousness where one performs at one's best and feels one's best. Now, it talks about the reason that they call this the flow state is because when you're in flow, every action, every decision, everything leads fluidly and seamlessly to the next. In other words, you're in a flow where it almost seems like you're not thinking. Now, I'm bringing this up because I know that we want to talk about something similar to this, and I thought it would be a good segue. Mihai talks a lot about how you get into this state. He talks a lot about what it feels like. There's certain stages that like they say that you're still very aware of who you are, but yet you kind of feel like you've let go. And what is really going on is these connections in the frontal part of your brain, it turns off something, and I don't want to get too crazy into the words here because it talks about the prefrontal cortex and the dorsolateral cortex and all that, and I don't think that's as important as what the effect is this little thing gets turned off. And he calls it, in layman's term, it's the part of your brain that houses your inner critic. It is the relentless, defeatist nag that is always a part of waking consciousness. When the inner critic shuts off, we feel this as tremendous freedom or as liberation. And this is a fantastic feeling for creatives, as it means the portion of the brain that is always judging your creative ideas and shooting them down before they ever get off the ground is turned off. And this state allows you to move from idea to idea far faster. So the point is that it's a cognitive function of the brain of a creative person to kind of get into these states where they are unaware of everything else around them. They are in complete focus, and it is because of the training of the brain, and it is because of the efficiency of the brain that allows the best of the creatives, of the artists, of the writers. A lot of writers experience this, athletes, musicians, and also actors. And the reason that I'm bringing this up, as you know, is because there seems to be a really big misunderstanding amongst I would say, the large majority of people when one hears of an artist or a musician or an actor saying that I just let go and let the character come out, or I just feel like I'm taken over by something and I flow with the moment. Mm-hmm. That what we're dealing with here is something that is not necessarily possession or demonic or anything of that nature, that it is a cognitive state that is actually what allows these people to be so good at what they do.
I really am glad you brought that up because for a few reasons. I mean, one, I can absolutely relate. I mean, just through music, I will, haven't done it as much as I used to, but when I was at the height of my being involved in music and creating music and playing music, I definitely went into the flow zone. I was the person who, when I would play my viola, I would have my eyes closed and swaying back and forth and just letting the emotion of what I was playing and the beauty of what I was playing come through without thinking about it. I would let go. I would just let the music sort of take over and flow through me. And if you haven't experienced something like this, it's difficult to describe, so you use terminology that people may understand, such as I sort of channel the composer, or I just let go and something else takes over. You use terminology like this because you're trying to describe the feeling to someone who hasn't felt it. And so you just use an analogy to get the point across. Never, ever in my time of music, being a musician, being a singer, being a writer, have I ever felt that I am allowing myself to be possessed by some external force, and yet I've used some of that terminology in an effort to try to explain it to someone who maybe hasn't had that type of experience. So I'm very sympathetic when we see, and I'll just take it all the way to the case that we wanted to talk about with regard to Robin Williams. I'm very sympathetic to the comments that he has been on the record saying that when he gets on stage, it almost feels like a possession, that he just lets go and something else takes over. I myself have used that type of terminology to try to describe what it feels like when I'm expressing myself artistically. It doesn't, as you say, necessarily mean you are succumbing to outside influence. It is generally just something that is coming from inside you, coming from a different aspect of your cognitive state. It's a different state of thinking. It's a different, it's how you allow pure creativity to flow. And so when I see articles coming out saying things like, obviously the tragic suicide of Robin Williams has been at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, because it just catches people so off guard when you hear about somebody whose entire sort of mission in life was to make people happy and make them laugh, to discover that he was depressed and ultimately took his own life tragically. That's hard for us to process. It doesn't seem to compute. And so we try to find ways to rationalize it. And those who can't rationalize it maybe look to, well, there must be some other explanation. So they start digging for explanations, and they come across these quotes that he's made about the way he feels when he performs, and they take it to the level of, here is proof that Robin Williams allowed himself willfully to be possessed by a demon. And I think that is such an incredible leap that it begs credulity. It's dishonest, actually, because it's not really what he says. So to take his quote and then change it into a headline saying he admits that he was possessed by a demon is not only an extreme leap from what he says to the actuality of it, but it's actually kind of dishonest, because that headline doesn't follow with what he actually said. So it's something that goes into the entire way that we view celebrity, that this idea that they are somehow all involved in this cabal of evil, and that they're all involved in occult type of activities. It's these leaps of unreality that we make to try to explain something that we don't understand, largely. And it really, really bothers me. Now, I am the first to admit that I absolutely believe 100% that we live in a supernatural world, and some people do succumb to demonic influence, but we have to be so careful not to confuse or conflate the people who, as your article states, that people who are just process things differently in their mind because they're artistic, because they're creative, because they have these gifts and talents, and people who legitimately allow themselves to be taken over by demonic entities. These do not necessarily follow the same path, and it's not, I would go so far as to say that it is not right for us to jump to those conclusions, because we don't know this person. He was a real human being who was struggling with real human emotions, and sadly he succumbed to those emotions. But we don't know. We do not know enough about what his spiritual life was, his home life, his mental state. We just don't know enough about it to make these giant leaps that he had somehow sold his soul to the devil in order to be a better comedian. I think that's really, really unfair, and it tracks right along with what you're saying in this article.
Well, yeah, I chose this article specifically not only because it was interesting, but because I knew that we wanted to take it down this road. And, just in the fact that we are dealing just most recently with Robin Williams, but it has happened so often. Almost any time that there's a tragedy in Hollywood or in the music industry, it really makes me angry and extremely sad that that the Christian community, I'm not including everyone, but largely a large portion of the Christian community is so quick to just one-liner write off a human soul with some flippant words such as, oh, he was in the occult anyway, or, oh, I'm not surprised, or, oh, everyone in Hollywood is part of satanic rituals, or, oh, it's just another blood sacrifice. That kind of stuff, it's so dehumanizing. It is so uncompassionate. And it takes the humanity from the person that we're talking about, lumps them into some absolutely untrue box, and then discards them without another thought. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt that the occult exists. There is no doubt that people do get wrapped up in it, but it's not everyone. I would say that most everyone in Hollywood probably goes through very intense training that teaches this very thing that we're talking about how to get into that flow state. I know it for a fact. That's part of the training for actors. And the very best actors actually live a character. And they live that character so that they can portray it, so that they can do their job well. It's not easy. I mean, look at Heath Ledger. That character that he played practically killed him. Literally killed him. Yeah. And he was, again, written off as, the occult got him. Well, we don't know what happened. We know that he was playing a very intense evil character. Mm-hmm. And I just, the ease with which people can just dehumanize another one of God's creations, it breaks my heart. And that's what I saw and what I felt most recently with Robin Williams. It's happened dozens and dozens of times with other celebrities.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that the part that bothers me the most is what you touched on there with these different comments that people make, almost as though, they're sort of taking pleasure in the fact that this happened because it's, just more proof that the Illuminati exists and that, these occult Hollywood actors are just asking for trouble, and then it's like validation for these theories that they've been promoting all this time. And we should not have such a weird bloodlust for people that are involved in something that we're not part of, because again, I have no doubt that Hollywood is largely very liberal, it's largely very atheistic, it's largely very different world than most of us live in, but it is not to be ignored the fact that it's also populated by human beings like you and I, mm-hmm. that have real struggles and real issues and real thoughts and real hearts. And even if these people were involved in some horrible occult practices, let's go there. Let's say, okay, maybe they are. Well, so we should be happy when they succumb to it and die? Like, what is wrong with us that we get this sort of kick that all of a sudden the adrenaline starts rushing and we're like, oh, another one bites the dust. It's sick. It sickens me, and it also completely discounts the possibility that this person isn't necessarily who we think they are. This person didn't necessarily have the same spiritual life that we presume that they did. We don't know if people are saved or not. We don't know what goes on inside their hearts and minds. We don't know if someone has a deathbed conversion. We just don't know these things. And by embracing this opinion that the way that they lived their life, what little we know of their life, by the way, we know their lives through sound bites, paparazzi, entertainment articles. We only know about the seediest, most salacious moments of their lives because that's what sells. The other 98% of their lives we are not privy to. And therefore, we we simply cannot make these sweeping judgments about them based on what we're fed by ravenous wolves who only want to give us the dirtiest, most salacious details about people that may or may not even be true.
Right.
We don't know. We just don't know.
No, and if like you said, if we want to go there, and if everybody thinks that everybody in Hollywood is in the occult and every musician has sold their soul to the devil, then what are we doing about it?
Absolutely.
Shouldn't we be doing something about it then? If that's really what you believe, these groups out there that have, they're watching occult watch groups or whatever they're doing, what are they doing to try to counter it if that's really what they think?
Absolutely. I mean, even at the minimum, why are they not devoting their prayer lives to these poor, lost, unfortunate souls instead of making a mockery of their lives? And again, I stress what little they know of their lives.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think people have to come face to face, some people, in order to understand how heartbreaking this is with the humanity of some of these people. And as a lot of people know, I actually know a lot of these people. I have a background in radio, and I've worked with a lot of musicians and actors and actresses. But usually we're talking about people who have passed, and that go through this horrible mockery. But I have an anecdotal situation of someone who is being horribly, horribly demonized right now. I don't want to even use demonized. My dear neighbors across the street are the woman of the house is the great aunt to Miley Cyrus.
Mm-hmm.
And they have just an amazingly close family. The whole Cyrus family is huge. They're very close. They have these family reunion every summer that usually has anywhere from 250 to 400 people at this family reunion. They're all extremely close. Everybody knows Miley, has known her since she was born. Billy Ray's a household name across the street. And everybody knows what's been going on with Miley over the last couple of years. She's gotten herself into some trouble. She's presenting herself really horribly. But every time I see these stories about her, my heart just breaks for my neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Because their hearts are breaking. They know her. They know the struggles they're going through. They know the struggles that Billy Ray and his wife have gone through, and they know how tough it is and in the industry, and how to try to resist the money and the people that are pushing you to do things that aren't necessarily what you want to do. And yeah, she has gotten herself into a mess, but she is a little girl.
Yes.
And just to dismiss, just that I can't really even look at most of the headlines that come through with her name.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because most of what you see that comes out, in fact, I'm going to point to someone specific, and I'm just going to name names here. There's a fine line between being aware of what's going on and making people aware of it and helping them to see things that they may not have previously seen, and taking it to a completely different level. And I'm just gonna throw it out there, Mark Dice. And he's someone who he puts a lot of really interesting stuff out there, and I've been following him for a very long time. I enjoy a lot of his man on the street stuff. I enjoy a lot of his sort of ambush type of reporting, but there's one thing he does that I can't handle, and he takes these different actors and actresses and he reduces them to just this pile of trash. And when he talks about Miley Cyrus, he'll call her that satanic Illuminati whore. Mm-hmm. Or if he talks about Kesha, he'll call her Satan's slut. And just this ridiculous type of thing that he talk about dehumanizing. Talk about not recognizing it. You're talking about a girl who is just barely 21 years old, talking about someone who has a mother, has a father, has a family, has people who love them, and you're not even coming from a place of being concerned. You're coming from a place of ridicule and shaming them and this type of thing. And it's admittedly hard not to be disgusted by much of the stuff that comes from these different actors, actresses, musicians, what have you, but to take it to the level of just dismissing them as though they are a lost cause, beyond redemption, beyond help, beyond hope, is so wrong and so contrary to what we are called to do. And in some ways, it puts us in the position that we are playing God. And I actually saw this. I'm going to transition a little bit, and if you want to take it back, Diana, it's okay, because we can go on this topic for a while. But I want to transition, speaking on the topic of artists and questioning that they are beyond redemption, beyond hope, or even questioning their very salvation if they are professing Christians, is a recent incident with our friends over at Canary Cry Radio. Mm-hmm. And their most recent podcast that they put out was an interview with Chris White, who has done some really interesting work about prophecy, and specifically with regard to the Antichrist and where the Antichrist might come from, who he might be, this type of thing. And we don't need to get into all of the specifics of that. If you want to hear Chris White's theory, you can go listen to the Canary Cry Radio interview, and you'll find out everything you need to know. But that's really not the point. The point is, those who know about Canary Cry Radio know that they do something really unique with their shows. Both Basil and Gons are very artistically minded, and their show tends to be somewhat of a multimedia experience. Basil is an artist. He's like a graphic artist, and for every single episode that comes out, he creates a work of art, which tends to be very thought-provoking, somewhat abstract, and the art is meant to be sort of his visual representation of what the subject of the show is about. So in the most recent episode, where the discussion was with regard to the Antichrist, Basil made a piece of art that involves, it's very provocative, it involves a cross that is upside down, and it's being tethered by like these ropes, being held upside down and sort of bound in an upside down manner. And it is a jarring, provocative image. Anyone who is Christian does not necessarily react with a warm and fuzzy way when they see the image of a cross being inverted. But it very much is a literal symbolic interpretation of what the Antichrist represents. And it goes very much to the point of what the discussion of that show is. And so, of course, there has been sort of an outpouring of negativity toward Canary Cry Radio and Basil specifically for this particular piece of art that he created, and requests to take it down, accusations of blasphemy, this type of thing. But what's worse is that at least one person has taken it to the level of questioning Basil's very salvation. And I can't abide that. I can't understand. Again, it comes from a place of people not understanding the artist's mind. Art is not necessarily always supposed to make you feel good. Art is, when it's good art, it evokes emotion from the viewer or the listener or the participant. It is meant to make you feel something. And that something that you feel isn't always good, but it should make you think. It should make you feel. It should inspire you in some way it should provoke your thoughts. It should be provocative. That's good art. That's what Basil has done. And to take that and to question his salvation, first of all, that's outrageous. it goes into also the discussion of Basil's personality, how he's very he's quirky. He kind of marches to the beat of his own drum. He likes to be silly. He likes to be a little bit outrageous. That is very much in line with the way a lot of artists are. They tend to, because their brains work differently, they tend to have personalities that are confronting at times, to put it mildly, and so this person accuses him of not only potentially not being saved, but of making a mockery of Christians. And I just take such issue with that, because not only is it just this fear-based reaction about something they don't understand, in this case his art and or his personality, but also it misses a really large point, that type of self-righteous condemning attitude is actually the thing that makes a mockery of Christians, because it flies in the face of everything that we're supposed to be.
You have said a lot there, my friend.
That's what I do.
Yeah. I saw that whole discussion too. It is absolutely uncalled for. It's embarrassing. I don't understand why people are so afraid of art that offends you. We're supposed to be standing up for other people's rights to do whatever, and you have a right to be. There is no right to not be offended, and artists. Often artists are critiqued on their ability to offend. That's what the highest critiqued artists get, is that they were able to shock and awe and jar people from their reality, because that's what the good artists do. They are the barometers for society. Artists see things in a different way. Artists tend to read the culture and extrapolate it, and depending on what your art form is, they either put that story into writing or into pictures or into sculpture or into photography. Whatever it is that their art form is, that tends to be what they do. And the best artists are usually foretelling the direction of the culture. It's very similar to what we were just talking about earlier. The somewhat prophetic books that we read. Aldous Huxley and George Orwell were reading the direction of the culture and putting into a story the direction that it was headed.
Right.
It's the same thing with good art. That a good art is going to tell you a story, and very often, especially today, the culture is not in a good place, so that story is not going to be good. So Basil is trying to tell the story of the Antichrist. Why would we want to elicit something other than ooh, ew? Yeah. I mean, that's the whole purpose.
Right. You shouldn't have anything related to a subject like that manipulating you into having a good feeling, because it isn't a good topic. And it makes me think, you raise a point. I had just had this book recently recommended to me, and I ordered it off of Amazon, but it's by Dr. Rookmacher, and I believe that he was a contemporary of Francis Schaeffer, who we'll talk about in a minute. But he wrote a book that was called Modern Art and the Death of a Culture. And the book it chronicles his belief that art, as you just said, not unlike fiction, can have a reflection of the culture, and not only that, but that it can serve as sort of a warning of where the culture may be headed. That's the point of his entire book. And I know he was a huge influence on Francis Schaeffer and his commentary on art and this type of thing. And, I'm so thankful to you for putting Francis Schaeffer more so on my radar, because I absolutely love his take on art and beauty, and how it is something that human beings in particular, Christians, I should say, in particular, should not be fearful of, that we should embrace about ourselves and we should embrace about others, and that we shouldn't be fearful of artistic representations in the culture, and to think more deeply about them, to not be threatened by it. And I want to have you speak a little bit more, because you'll do so more eloquently than me, on what Francis Schaeffer had to say about art, because, Christians used to lead the charge on art. It used to be that all art, or a large part of art, I should say, that moved people came from the Christian community, came from the Christian mind, and came from the Christian ideology. We were not afraid of it. In fact, we pushed art to the forefront, and it seems that something has happened along the way where, rather than embracing and leading in artistic pursuits, we now tend to shy away from it unless it fits into this very neat and tidy little box of what we expect that art should look like. So talk to us a little bit about Schaeffer and his commentary on human beings and art and beauty and all of that.
Okay. I will do my best to go down a straight path, but that's a very broad topic. And I will start first by saying that the reason that Christians used to be at the forefront of art, they were also at the forefront of science. Mm-hmm. Christianity was at the forefront of civilization, because up until the Enlightenment, there was what Schaeffer would call a Christian consensus, meaning that the overarching worldview of everyone was that at least there was an ultimate reality that was something other than ourselves.
Right.
And so that's why Christianity is at the forefront of everything up until the Enlightenment. And at that point it split off. And I will tell you, yes, that Hans Rookmaaker was one of Schaeffer's contemporaries. He died only a few years before Francis Schaeffer did. He is a Dutch art historian, I believe, so I'm sure that he got a lot of his influence from him. And I'm sure that the stories that they tell are very similar, and that book that you ordered is probably tracks right along with Schaeffer's How Should We Then Live, and The God Who Is There, and also Art in the Bible. Mm-hmm. But the theory that both Schaeffer and Rookmaaker work by is that you can follow culture by watching art, and that art reflects and pushes the worldview, the prevalent worldview. So you always have competing worldviews. There always has been since the beginning of time. But the prevalent worldview, like I said, up until the Enlightenment, was that there is an ultimate reality that is other than ourself, and that this was the consensus, and so then would follow the art. And when I say art, I'm talking about architecture, paintings, sculpture, literature, everything. That's the art, the humanities. And so if you kind of start maybe around the time of the great Greek and Roman arts, where they had these intricate architecture, and they were known for their wonderful statues. The thought process behind that, or the worldview behind that, was that all of the cosmos could be explained via mathematics. It was the time of Pythagoras, and they were developing geometry and algebra, and so the whole cosmos at that point, they thought, could be explained via math. So the reflection of the mathematical universe worldview came out in these wonderful, elaborate architectural masterpieces that were all very much in proportion to the human body was measured in proportion because that was thought to be beautifully aesthetic. And so a lot of the golden ratio and all those things were coming out at that time. And so things were very proportionate and very beautiful, I think, to the human eye, because I do think that there is truth in a mathematical universe. I think that is probably a very a very true truth. Not taking cosmos all the way back to math only, but that God does in fact order things mathematically. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just kind of I just want to do like a real quick topographical thing, because anybody could study art history for hours and hours and hours and hours. But just following along the way that Christian thought went, or the consensus, let me just say the consensus worldview moved from this idea where the Greeks were in charge with their mathematical ideas, kind of got infiltrated a little bit by the Far East, and then we had this period of time during the Byzantine Empire where we were dealing a lot with dualism, a little bit of Gnosticism coming in there, where the material world was bad and the spiritual world was good. And if you think about Byzantine art, you think about the icons. They're very formal and flat, and they always, just talking about Christian art in this instance, they would always show the divinity of Jesus. He always had the halo and the gold, and there was never anything natural. There wasn't. If you look at a Byzantine art, you'll never see a tree or a flower or a lake. It's always just like a plain, usually golden or something very spiritual background. And so that was reflecting the worldview of that time. And as time moved on, we got into the Middle Ages, where the Franciscan monks were starting to understand that Jesus' divinity, yeah, we understand that, but we're also, and this also tracks with church history too. No, we need to deal with the humanity of Jesus, and so they started dealing with God is fully man, fully human, or fully man, fully God, dealing with that whole thing in theology and philosophy. And so the art started coming out where all of a sudden we saw that man looked more realistic. He started to have more form. You started to see trees and water and whole scenes in the artwork. It was St. Francis of Assisi is the first person to put together a nativity scene where they put Jesus in the manger and the animals and in a barn or whatever that looked like. And so again, we see the art is reflecting what the culture is going through, and the culture is going through this revolution of understanding that Jesus was fully man. And moving along now, we're getting close to the Renaissance, and in the Renaissance, people are really starting to appreciate man for himself. Man starting to decide that a lot of science is bubbling to the surface. We're understanding more intricate mathematics. We've got astronomy. We have all these medicines starting to come around, and so man's starting to feel pretty good about himself, and man starts putting himself up on a pedestal. And in the Renaissance is when we see just some of the most beautiful realism starts coming out. You start thinking about Raphael and Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, and they're putting out these wonderfully realistic pieces of art that are really showing that man is good, and you're starting to see a lot of landscapes, and you're starting to see that nature is coming into focus, where it's not bad. Nature's not bad, materialism's not bad, it's all good. And then we move from that point to where the split starts coming, because now we're getting into the Enlightenment era, and that's when we decide God is dead. And it is at this point where the Christian consensus is going to start having a real strain. And And it's at this point where Christians are going to start not liking the art, because we have this split happening now where the materialism really comes in, and determinism. That was like the original, when we first decided that God was dead as a culture, when Nietzsche wrote that, and when the artists and the philosophers started understanding what that meant. If God was dead, if there is no transcendent meaning to life, then, or if there's no transcendent being, then life is an accident, and that was where we were going with science, that life was an accident of matter, time, energy. And so if that is the case, then we're an accident. There is no meaning. And so this is where the artists start, this is where it really starts getting intense, because the artists and the philosophers have an understanding that the average person doesn't have, that realizes, okay, if we are nothing but machines and there is no ultimate meaning to life, then all of a sudden the beauty starts going away, because beauty has no no point of reference, because there is nothing transcendent above us. And that, at that point, we started seeing things like cubism and fragmented art and reductionism, and this is when art started going down the road of, I guess I want to use ideas that people know, like Picasso, where the human form was turned into something weird, somewhat cubic. The cubists were reacting to determinism, that were nothing but, pieces of a machine. And then there was, of course, the reaction to that was Romanticism, and which then started creating things that were only idealistic. So we lost realism here, because there is no realism. We are really a machine. So that those people were going down the road of this fragmented art, on down to abstract art, whereas the romanticism that was trying to replace it ended up going into surrealism and expressionism along the lines of Dali, very surrealistic. And then this is all reflecting that the Christian consensus is diminishing. Now, while we moved over to the United States and the Christian consensus was large here, because we were founded primarily on the Puritans, and they did in fact come over here for religious freedom. America was founded on a Christian consensus, but in Europe, where art and culture was continuing down the same road, that consensus was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and so the art is reflecting it. In now we're getting to abstract art, and we're getting into impressionism, and then we get all the way down into existentialism, because now we've gotten to the point where I can't live with the fact that there's no meaning, so I'm just going to create these things that don't allow choice, which was the whole thing that Jackson Pollock was into. His art was all, he was trying to create random art when he was swinging the paint cans and everything, but he got really frustrated, because every time he would start swinging these cans, they would get into a pattern. Right. And he's trying to prove that there is no, he's trying to prove that life really is just random chance, and his artwork's not letting him do that. So he had to quit with the swinging cans and start just throwing paint with his his brush or whatever else he was using. But that's kind of I'm trying. I hope I'm making some kind of sense here, where it's following along in the culture, and now we get into just in the last couple of decades into pop art. And it's funny that you brought up Andy Warhol, because earlier, because Andy Warhol is kind of the example of pop art, where he's putting up Campbell soup cans and calling it art and blowing up comic book looking women. And that kind of stuff really just was a parody and a social commentary that really the only thing that's going on right now is commercialism, and there is no other meaning to life. Mm-hmm. And we get now we're into this modern art that seems very formless. It seems to be non-art. But if you're following this whole stream of art, where are we today? We're in an overarching worldview of nihilism. And what is nihilism? It is there is no point, there is no form. And so does not modern art reflect the modern consensus of worldview?
And as such, is it not something that we as a culture should be paying attention to rather than afraid of?
Yes, actually. And there is, Francis Schaeffer had a student named Nancy Piercy who kind of took on his legend, his legacy of dealing with art. She wrote this book called Saving Leonardo, which is an extension of Francis Schaeffer's work just on into modern times. And I want to read her last two paragraphs of the section on art in here. And she is talking, she kind of just went through a little bit of what I was talking to, the flow of art and the flow of worldview and why it's important for Christians. And she ends this chapter saying, sadly, when Christians do actually pay attention to modern art, they often condemn or even ridicule it. Often when I show slides of modern art in my classes, students make jokes about soi-disant artists, laughing all the way to the bank. Admittedly, the rejection of skill has sometimes allowed unscrupulous people to claim the prestige and status of art for inferior work. But serious art must be taken seriously. We may not personally like certain art forms or find them beautiful at all. Nevertheless, we have an obligation to pay attention to what they tell us. We should give artists the respect of asking what they intended in their works, not only how we react to them. As Hans Rugmacher once said, many works would be senseless, real junk, except for the fact that being displayed as art. They are exhibited because they have a message of almost religious importance, interpreting man and his world. Christians are responsible for learning how to read that message, just as missionaries are responsible for learning the language of the culture where they go to serve. They must also show empathy and understanding to those who are captured by destructive and nihilistic worldviews. As Schaeffer once wrote, there is nothing uglier than theological orthodoxy without understanding or compassion. Only by demonstrating genuine compassion will Christians earn the right to offer a biblical alternative.
I think that whole thing is just absolutely fascinating and right on track with what we're talking about. And then take it to the level of the lack of respect that people have for the arts because they don't understand it. And it may very well be, as you're saying, a reflection of modern art and how modern art does have this nihilistic nature to it, and it's very confronting, and it also tends to, I've noticed a lot with modern art, it tends to be overtly blasphemous sometimes. You know, there's that whole controversy about the artist who displayed his work in New York City where it was, you know, images of a crucifix covered in urine, things like that. Very confronting, very blasphemous, very upsetting, and yet to completely disregard it disregards what it says about our current culture. Mm-hmm. It actually succinctly describes what our current culture tends to feel about the things that we hold dear, and what can we learn from that? How do we respond to that? Okay. It's important not to disregard it. And it certainly doesn't mean that we have to embrace it. celebrate
You don't have to buy it. You don't have to put it on your mantle. But that is an extremely important piece of art.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is to our detriment to disregard it as somebody's sort of juvenile decision to blaspheme. It carries so much more meaning and significance in a sociological and cultural conversation that we should be having. So the point is that it kind of leads into this idea that we have these very polarized and very extreme views as Christians about what's allowed, what's not allowed, what's worthy of our attention, and what's not. And on that subject, it also, when we do find things that we deem to be undesirable, unworthy, and outside of the bounds, we tend to think that it's fair game for our ridicule, for our disdain, and for our mockery. And whether that's Robin Williams, whether that's artists in general, or even into the realm of the political ideology, things that we don't agree with, that we don't understand. If it falls outside of those bounds of what we have determined to be acceptable, I'm noticing this really disturbing trend, and I'm maybe taking somewhat of a 180 turn here, but I'm noticing this disturbing trend where we think that if something is objectionable to us or flies in the face of what we hold to be true or dear, that we have a tendency to embrace this really, really nasty behavior toward it. And I'll provide you with an example. And I think the example of the way that we just take it upon ourselves to proclaim that Robin Williams is possessed by demons is a pretty apt example of that. Because we cannot forget he has a surviving wife, he has surviving children, and can you imagine losing your parent and then reading these articles about your parent that you just lost? And having people speak so flippantly about something that they don't know and that they do not understand. I read that Robin Williams' daughter actually extracted herself from social media because she was so upset by so many of the things that she was seeing in the wake of her dad's unfortunate passing. But we'll take it even into the political realm. I know you've seen stuff like this. We've talked about it before. But when we talk about conservatives versus liberals, Christians tend to be on the more conservative side of the political spectrum, or what we are told conservatism means. We're kind of told this is where you go. This is the box you fit into. But since we find ourselves so utterly polarized from the opposite, that, there is no middle ground. It's one or the other, black or white, red or blue. We feel that we can take these figures who are on the opposite side and just lambast them in the most cruel and demeaning and dehumanizing ways. I have seen things coming through my feed, and I'm sure you have too. I'm sure most of the listeners have, and hopefully not, but maybe some of them have participated in this type of behavior. But let's take Hillary Clinton. Boy, she gets a lot of grief about, and I'm not apologizing for her political views, her ideologies, or the things that she has involved herself with. That's not the point. The point is, it is completely contrary to what we believe as Christians when we post things like ridiculing her thunder thighs and her old saggy face and all of these crazy things that aren't even necessarily true, but that's not the point. The fact that we don't like her ideology, so it's okay to pick on her physical appearance. It's this extreme disconnect, I think, from the people on the other side of the spectrum as being human beings. And I think that happens with art. I think that we would find the artist who creates art that is contrary to anything that makes us feel comfortable. We would have a tendency to see that artist as almost an object of disdain rather than another human being. And we do the same thing with politics. There was one that came through my feed about Michelle Obama, and I don't know why this is more common with women. But I have seen the trend that it is a lot easier to pick apart the physical appearance of women than it is of men. But perhaps that's because as women we are more sensitive to that. I don't know. But there was one that came through talking about Michelle Obama, and of course she's got this whole nutritional initiative with school lunches and that type of thing. And the article stated, fat Michelle Obama has no business talking about nutrition. And the person who posted this link to this article, which the headline was offensive enough, but they felt just putting the cherry on top of the sundae by writing moo to go along with it. A professing Christian. That kills me. That kills me. And then when you confront them, which I have often done, and said, that's not very nice. That's not very kind. They'll come back with, well, the Christians are oppressed all around the world, and we always have been, and the things that people do to Christians are so outrageous and so cruel and so dehumanizing that, I can't believe you're defending them, but you're not defending us. I mean, look at what Hillary Clinton has done with regard to, the socialism, with regard to Benghazi. Look at all of these horrible things she's done. I have every right to talk about her thunder thighs and her old lady face. Like, what?
No, it's absolutely antithetical to Christianity. And you know what? It's that people, they don't stop with just political figures, which put themselves out there and therefore have to expect some of that kind of stuff. And I don't condone it. I absolutely hate it when I see it. But they are putting themselves out there. What about these people that pass around the seen at Walmart memes, or just the memes in general, where they take a horrible picture of some other human being that they know nothing of, nothing about, who is overweight or dressed poorly or looks like an idiot for whatever, like we all haven't been caught in with facial expressions that couldn't be used for any of those memes.
Yeah.
I mean, and just passing those around and thinking it's okay to say something horrible about another human being, God's child soul out there that you know nothing about, but it's okay to just, what's the point? Is it supposed to make someone feel better about themselves? That's the thing. I don't understand the point of the scene at Walmart memes. I don't get them.
I don't either. And in fact, I'm always waiting for myself to show up in one of those because I'm notorious for going grocery shopping at Walmart at like 3:00 in the morning in my pajamas with like the day's makeup smeared across my face, my ponytail on top of my head. If I'm going shopping at 3 a.m., I don't care what I look like, but somebody could take a picture of me and put it on the People of Walmart site, and everybody would have a good laugh. And they have no idea why I'm shopping at 3 a.m. or why I do, look the way that I do. And it's hurtful. It's mean and it's hurtful, and we shouldn't do those things. We shouldn't be that way. And it speaks to, I think, this, human thing where we feel better about ourselves if we can take other people down, and I think a lot of times, especially with the people of Walmart, when it comes from professing Christians, I think there's this whole meme about how people who shop at Walmart in the middle of the night are probably on welfare or some, low income people, and the disdain that we have for them. And so they're fair game, to be made fun of, and it's not right. It's not nice, and it kind of it speaks a little bit to the topic that you and I discuss a lot, which is extremism and extreme behavior when it comes to the current Christian climate. Anything that falls outside of something that we like, agree with, or understand is open season to be ripped to shreds, whether it's in a commentary or whether it's in a mean-spirited meme. Whatever the case is, if it's something we don't understand, we take it down, shut it down. We can't have it, we can't see it, and if we have to see it, we are going to try our hardest to destroy it until it looks like nothing. And doesn't it seem like the more constructive thing to do would be to try to at least understand where these people are coming from, why it is that they believe what they believe, how they got there, and if we still come out the other side of that in complete disagreement, which in a lot of cases we probably will, at least we took the time to recognize the human being behind that idea, belief, or art, or whatever it is. At least we took the time to try to understand that there is a person there, and that person has a human experience that they've gone through that has gotten them to where they are. And when we can recognize that really at the end of the day, they're not much different than us. It's just that they have a different point of view. Maybe sometimes that point of view is destructive, but they're still a human being, and we can feel compassion and love and maybe even pity for them if they're that off track. But pity is a better feeling than hate. Feeling sorry for someone is an expression of compassion, because it leads you to praying for them and wanting better for them and hoping that they see the light, whatever the case is. It's so much better than the hate and the vitriol and the dismissiveness that comes along with just putting things that you don't understand in that bucket of, well, this person's just controlled by demons, so why should I even care?
Right.
It's sad. It's very sad.
Yes. I think that when we talk about, I wish I had one of my books down here next to me right now. I'm trying to think. I talked about it earlier in the show at some point. We keep coming back to the same points. That must mean a good show, huh? We keep reiterating the same points in different ways.
Yeah.
Talking about how the root of sin is truly coveting. Mm-hmm. And, Paul talks about that, and there is, I think I wrote about it on my wall earlier this week. Francis Schaeffer, again, has a book called True Spirituality, and this book talks about how he reiterates the fact that covetousness is if you were to look at the Ten Commandments, they are all of them, except for thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, are all outward actions, and that coveting is the only inward action. It's the only one that you have to examine yourself on, and therefore it's the one that's easiest to hide. And he says that in order to live, what he's calling is how do you. The premise of the book is, how do we live like we're supposed to in this god-awful world? Mm-hmm. That's the premise of the book. Pretty simple.
Right.
And he starts out with saying that the key to living a successful life is pure and simple to be thankful and to be content. And that the only way to be content and to be thankful is to not be covetous. They cancel each other out. Anytime that you are unable to be content, and you don't have to like it, but to be content in where you are, like Paul was content in prison. He didn't like being in prison. He didn't want to be in prison. He didn't say, oh, I can't wait till I'm in prison again. But he was content in his circumstances. And when you're not content in your circumstances, he contends that you are coveting against God, because he has put you somewhere or has allowed you to be somewhere where you're not thankful. Mm-hmm. And he talks about the test of finding out if you're maintaining this type of trying to rid yourself of covetousness is that you are to love God enough to be content in all your situations, and to love man enough to not, this is the one I can't remember, to love man enough to be something. But the test was that if you feel like you would be happy for something bad to happen to another person, or if something bad happened to another person, you wouldn't care, that you are you're putting yourself in ungratefulness and in a state of covetousness.
Mm-hmm. And, that is really interesting because it kind of branches throughout everything that we've discussed thus far. Even a lot of the articles that we discussed, whether it's these unboxing videos, the covetousness that comes along with, you get a thrill by watching someone else open it, but ultimately the end feeling is, I wish I had that.
Right.
Whether it's, not getting along with your neighbors because maybe they have something that you wish you had, or you have something you don't want them to have. You're not concerned about their betterment. You're concerned only with your own. And I would say that a test of a person's character is whether they want everything that someone else has, or whether they are happy that someone else has the things that they do. You feel as though the betterment of somebody else for the position that they're in is something that you rejoice in, rather than wanting it for yourself rather than them, because you have determined on some level that they do not deserve it as much as you do. Mm-hmm. And it makes a lot of sense. And I think it crosses into all of these different territories. It crosses into all of these different ways in which we relate with one another, the way we relate with the world, and maybe even the way that we act or talk about people who are celebrities, going back to that topic. How much of the hate and the vitriol coming out of people who are criticizing artists, actors, musicians is because they legitimately feel that these people are worthy of that kind of vitriol, or how much of it is because deep down, in a place that you might not even want to admit exists, you're jealous of their success. You're jealous of the things that they have. You're jealous of what you perceive to be the good life. And you think that they don't deserve it as much as perhaps you do. And therefore there must be some other way that they achieved all of that money and success and fame. It can't be through their artistry. It can't be through their gifts. It has to be through these other forces that made it happen, because that's the only way that you can explain why that person has what you should have.
Absolutely. And then the flippant disregard of humanity that we were talking about earlier flies directly in the face of, if you wish something bad on someone or wouldn't care if something bad happened, mm-hmm. it flies right exactly in that.
And then take it a step further, and the incessant need to justify all of the reasons why you think that person probably died in their sin and is going to hell. It tracks kind of right along those same lines, because they don't deserve heaven as much as you do. And because you have lived as good a life as you possibly can, and you have checked all the boxes, you've been a Christian for at least X amount of years. That's got to count for something.
It does.
You have gone to church a lot, and you are constantly praying. So just by that alone, you deserve heaven so much more than somebody who might have ran from Jesus their entire life, but in the moment just before they breathed their last breath, they looked and said, "Save me, Jesus. Help me. I am a sinner, and I don't want to go to hell, and I know you're there, and I believe in you. Help me." And you say, "Well, that sucks. They got to live a life doing whatever they pleased."
Isn't there a parable about that?
Yeah, talk about a cosmic get-out-of-jail-free card. But in reality, the correct reaction to that is, praise the Lord, hallelujah. They saw the light before it was too late. Mm-hmm. You should be excited by the notion of standing next to that person in eternity and saying, "I'm so glad you made it, man. I'm so happy for you." But instead, we have this reaction, which is like, no, they don't deserve it. I don't care. They lived a bad life. And that is just, it eliminates the concept of grace. It eliminates the concept that we have such a loving and merciful God and Savior who made this sacrifice for us so that we don't have to spend our entire lives proving that we're worth it or that we're worthy. And I think in moments where covetousness boils to the surface, Christians forget their foundational beliefs, why they are Christians in the first place. And just on a slightly different note, but kind of hearkening back to what we were just talking about a while ago about the assumption, these grand assumptions that different types of artists or entertainers are necessarily led by demons because of things that they say or things that we do that we don't quite understand. It reminds me of this conversation that took place in the Extraordinary Intelligence discussion group just within the past couple of days. And I by no means am trying to ridicule the lovely member of the group who sort of sparked this conversation, because if I can say anything is that he was very generous in the way he interacted with us. Things got a little heated for a minute and he apologized. He was very kind. So I'm not trying to poke fun at him. However, I do want to point out that somehow a conversation that we were having might have been about Robin Williams. I can't remember now, but it devolved into this discussion of magicians. And I'm not talking about black magicians or ceremonial magicians like Aleister Crowley or, Jack Parsons, any of these kind of people, but more like the street magicians, illusionists, David Copperfield, David Blaine, Chris Angel, this type of characters. And this lovely group member, he suggested that all of these magicians are using demons to perform their illusions, their magic tricks. And he was very adamant about it, very convinced of it. And it was yourself, me, and one or two other people that were trying to explain to this guy that he was really off base, because, every trick that he brought up that he thought was, well, how do you explain this? It must be demons. We were able to take about 30 seconds and Google it and find a YouTube video showing you how to do it. How you can change water into ice, or how, you can do these different card tricks or levitations or whatever. There's tricks. They're illusions. They're called illusions for a reason. And then he would go to the place where he'd say, well, never have they ever come forward and explained how they did it. And it's like, well, but then it would cease to be an illusion if we knew how they did it, because then there's no illusion. It's a clear trick that we totally understand, and it's not impressive anymore. But that is sort of another example of the way someone can take something that they don't understand, because it's just not something that they've personally studied or been educated about, and ascribe demons to it because they don't get it.
Yeah, and again, we have to make sure that people understand that we are not naturalists. Both Nat and I are very much in understanding that the supernatural is very at work in the world, and that magic absolutely does exist with a K. And I think that the point that I know that I made this point on that very conversation was that black magic is very real. Ritualistic magic is very real, but those guys aren't out, pulling rabbits out of hats. That's just not what that's not what they do. No. These guys are performers. They are entertainers. There is an entire History Channel show dedicated to reveals on most of the really big ones that you have seen. And it's one of those things that makes you look foolish when you say that he poured water in a cup and ice cubes came out, and that it's obvious that the only way that could be done is that demons were involved. And that is the sort of silly foolishness that does, in fact, make Christians look ridiculous.
Right, because, you're very right to point out that neither of us are materialists or naturalists. And in fact, I would venture to say that perhaps I focus on supernatural things more than the average Christian. I definitely have a supernatural worldview, so to speak, but there's also a level of discernment that is required so that you don't take a trip into this realm where you're almost sounding like hearkening back to the witch trials. I mean, you think of these women who were hung because they made herbal remedies out of their gardens, and we didn't understand it. We didn't understand how they could be healing people with these herbs, or how they could be, knowing these old folk remedies. So we instantly said, well, demons must be helping them. Mm-hmm. So she's a witch. Burn the witch. And I see a frightening trend toward that in modern Christians. It's almost a de-evolution of what we should be advancing in our maturity as Christians. Unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of sort of Dark Ages mentality coming back to the forefront, and it's a little alarming. I saw somebody just the other day posting something on Facebook about, you shouldn't suffer a witch to live, and there was a legitimate discussion taking place in the thread, the comments of that, talking about different instances wherein it should be okay to kill a witch.
Oh my goodness.
And it scared the crap out of me. Yeah. It really did. It scared me.
Scary.
Yeah. And so, what I would say is that while we very, very much believe that demons and this dark realm is at work and is at play in our daily lives, and there is this supernatural realm that is ever present, something tells me that their goals and their aims are sort of loftier than a card trick or a parlor trick, that what gain would they get from that, especially when it's something that can be so easily mimicked by just sleight of hand. It takes us into that realm, as you say, of looking somewhat foolish. However, I do know a magic trick.
Oh.
If you want to, it doesn't translate extremely well to radio, but I'm gonna try it.
Okay.
And we'll see how it goes. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Ta-da! I just performed the magical feat of pulling a cat out of a hat.
What was the name of the demon that helped you do that?
You just don't understand my magic. I was just in the flow zone. Well, anyway, everyone, on that note, we are going to wrap up episode 2 of the podcast. We hope that you found it interesting, informative, fun at some times. It's kind of heavy duty this time, and that's okay. But if you have anything that you want to suggest for our next episode as far as topics, surely Diana and I are never at a loss for things that we want to talk about. But if you would like to hear us talk about something, you can certainly reach us through the contact form at extraordinaryintelligence.com. There is a new section on the extraordinaryintelligence.com website that says the podcast. It's in the navigation bar. You can click on that and find last week's episode. If you didn't get a chance to hear us, we would really encourage you to download that and take a listen if you feel so inclined. Not only give us your suggestions for future shows, but tell us what you thought about last show and this show. We would love to engage in a conversation with you. You can go to extraordinaryintelligence.com and use the comment section in the show notes to share your thoughts. You can send us an email, or you can join the Extraordinary Intelligence discussion group on Facebook, where we're going to be posting all of our shows and hopefully get lively threads discussing the topics going through that. You can find a link to that at the right-hand sidebar on, once again, extraordinaryintelligence.com. In the right sidebar, you'll find links to iTunes feed and Stitcher and all of that wonderful stuff where you can find us. And eventually we're going to find a more permanent home for the podcast. But right now it's all going to be contained under the banner of extraordinaryintelligence.com. So get your butt over there and start interacting with us and tell us what you think about the show thus far, even if you think it sucks. Which I just can't imagine. Can you, Diana?
No.
But we've had a lot of fun doing this, and we hope that you're having fun along with us and in your own minds taking notes. Looking forward to engaging in the conversation with us. We're on Facebook all the time in the discussion group. Come look us up. Come find us. Join in the discussion. And until next time, we are so glad that you joined us here in the pod, and we look forward to welcoming you back.
We need a magic trick.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we could do it something like this because...
What are you eating?
You know what's kind of funny? The last time we recorded, I was eating an oatmeal cream pie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm eating today. And the funny thing is, I almost never have these.
I'm eating green beans.
Well, you're fancier. I'm on a detox. That was going to harken back to something that we said. Harkening back. If I gave up the Diet Coke, then you would respect me more as a person and as a woman?
No.
Hey, get off of there. Get out of my chair. Get out of my chair.
Oh, Solly.
Yes, you get out of my chair, man. I'm serious. Get down.
No, really, get down.
Okay, I gotta pick you up and move you because you're being a butthead. I know.
So you have to chunk out, I think it was 4, right? 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first cough and 2 pee breaks and then whatever happened at the end there. Exactly. It's stressful.
I don't need that kind of pressure.
I can't take the stress, man.